Welcome to NTD Good Morning.
Here are today's top stories. 17 Americans have returned to the U.S. from the Hantavirus hit cruise ship. At least one person has tested positive. What we know so far.
And President Trump rejects Iran's response to the latest U.S. peace proposal as, quote, totally unacceptable. The U.S. blockade of Iranian ports continues to be enforced by more than 20 warships.
Top-level U.S.-China meetings this week with President Trump and Secretary Bessent heading to Asia. What both sides aim to achieve and the obstacles in the way.
Congress returning to Washington this week with hearings focused on China, COVID oversight, defense spending, and border enforcement, with Senate Republicans moving forward with funding plans for ICE and CBP.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Today is Monday, May 11th. This is NTD Good Morning. In today's top news, the latest updates on the Hantavirus outbreak aboard that cruise ship.
17 Americans have now arrived at home, including one person who has tested positive for the Hantavirus and another showing some symptoms. Here are the details on that.
17 Americans have arrived in the United States today for monitoring after a hantavirus outbreak on a cruise ship. The outbreak began aboard the cruise ship MV Hondius and triggered a multinational evacuation from Tenerife in the Canary Islands. The Department of Health and Human Services says one U.S. passenger is showing symptoms and another has tested mildly positive. The department says all passengers will undergo evaluation at a federal quarantine facility in Nebraska. The CDC says it has activated emergency operations and deployed teams to support monitoring and coordination with state health departments. The CDC stressing the situation is not comparable to COVID-19.
This is not COVID, Jake, and we don't want to treat it like COVID. We don't want to cause a public panic over this. We want to treat it with the hantavirus protocols that we're successful in containing outbreaks in the past.
Dr. Jay Bhattacharya telling CNN that patients who are not showing symptoms are not at risk of spreading the virus.
Because the virus doesn't spread unless somebody has active symptoms, those passengers on the planes are considered contacts of contacts. So again, there's not a reason to do that kind of sort of recursive contact tracing.
And overnight, a French passenger tested positive for the hantavirus.
Of the 5 French citizens repatriated, one person developed symptoms during the flight. Unfortunately, her condition worsened overnight, and I can confirm this morning that the tests came back positive for hantavirus. This patient has hantavirus and is in a specialized infectious disease hospital, which has implemented strict protective measures in the rooms to prevent the virus from spreading.
French authorities say all 5 French passengers are now under strict isolation until further notice. The World Health Organization recommends a 42-day quarantine for exposed passengers either in a facility or at home. The WHO also stressing this is not another COVID pandemic and the risk to the public is low.
We are expecting U.S. health officials to brief reporters this morning, and we're going to keep you updated on that.
Meanwhile, President Trump rejecting Iran's response to the most recent U.S. peace proposal, describing it as totally unacceptable.
NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that, plus the latest on the U.S. blockade of the Iranian ports.
President Trump reacting to Iran's peace proposal response yesterday, writing, "I have just read the response from Iran's so-called representatives. I don't like it. Totally unacceptable." President Trump accusing Iran of, quote, playing games with the United States and the rest of the world for 47 years. Delay, delay, delay. The president adding, for 47 years, the Iranians have been tapping us along, keeping us waiting, killing our people with their roadside bombs, destroying protests, and recently wiping out 42,000 innocent unarmed protesters, and laughing at our now great again country. They will be laughing no longer. Iranian state-run media says the current negotiations should focus exclusively on stopping the fighting in the region. It says other issues, including Iran's nuclear program, should be discussed later. The president discussing the difficulty of dealing with Iran's current third string of leaders while speaking with Full Measure News.
They make a deal and then they break it, then they make a deal, they break it. It's a difficult group, but from a military standpoint, I mean, if we left today, it would take them 20 years to rebuild.
President Trump expressing confidence that the nuclear materials in Iran are secured by the Space Force, even if not yet in U.S. possession.
If somebody walked in, they can tell you his name, his address, the number of his badge. No, we have that very well surveilled. If anybody got near the place, we will know about it, and we'll blow them up. We'll blow them up.
Although the president says Iran is militarily defeated, he says there are still key targets the U.S. could strike if hostilities resume.
We have certain targets that we wanted to, and we've done probably 70% of them. But we have other targets that we could conceivably hit. But even if we didn't do that, that would just be final touches.
On why the president believes operations against Iran are worth the political hit from higher gas prices.
It's really easy to answer. We cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon because they're crazy.
Meanwhile, the blockade of Iranian ports continues, enforced by over 20 U.S. warships. Central Command says U.S. forces have redirected 61 commercial vessels and disabled 4 to ensure compliance. CENTCOM sharing images of U.S. Marines rappelling from an MH-60S Seahawk while training on the flight deck of USS Tripoli. It says the training ensures Marines remain ready should they be called to board non-compliant ships to enforce the blockade. The United Kingdom stated Saturday it was deploying the MHS Dragon, a destroyer, to the Strait of Hormuz. That follows France's deployment of a carrier strike group to the Red Sea, as Britain and France say they are working to protect the vital trade route.
As a fragile U.S.-Iran ceasefire remains in place for now, the region is on edge, the Kuwait Army posting yesterday on X that it detected hostile drones in its airspace. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And for analysis on the state of the Iran war, I spoke with Dr. Eric Mandel. He's the founder and director of the Middle East Political and Information Network. I asked him why Iran would send through a counterproposal to the U.S. peace offer that would be unacceptable to the U.S. Have a look.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me this morning. So Iran's strategy is to prolong these negotiations. They believe time's on their side. And their demands, according to the Hezbollah-based Al-Mayadin network, they're uncompromising. They want America to give Iran control of the Straits of Hormuz and the blockade, and make it a permanent ceasefire with Lebanon, removal of all American sanctions. And this isn't going to work for President Trump or for American national security interests. Now, the president could flip the script and really address the American people and tell them that we need months, we need patience, explain why it's in our national security interests for the Straits of Hormuz to be open an international waterway. And if it cannot be opened by diplomacy, it must be forcefully opened, or else, as the president goes to China, the Straits of Taiwan, the South China Sea, will be threatened in every international waterway. Now, I think the president, and I hope the administration all knows, that we have created a strategic, historic opportunity right now to advance our interests and degrade Iran. And really have to realize that Iran can't import any gasoline. People think they're fossil fuel independent. They cannot import their gasoline, which will put tremendous strain on the economy, and they cannot sell their oil. So finally, the president also has not chosen to threaten Iran with the most important thing, which is the ultimate weapon for their survival, and that would be arming and bringing together the internal opposition. And our media has basically told everyone that Iran is winning. Survival is not winning. That is not a victory. But we're now 8 weeks total between the ceasefire and the kinetic action. This is early here, but patience is going to win this war.
So when we speak about time, I want to get your view on, can the president continue to use the naval blockade to force the Iranian regime to fold, or will it take more? You had suggested potentially arming opposition. If that is the strategy, as a second question, who would be the people to arm specifically?
So I'll take the second question first. One of the things we did, if we think back in time, can the CIA organize an internal opposition to threaten a repressive regime? That happened back in the 80s with the Mujahideen. Granted, what was left over turned out to be a Taliban, but the Iranian people are very different. We believe that over 90% of the Iranian people would be pro-Western. They may be the most pro-Western next to the Israeli population. There is many interests here. That is the ultimate answer. We may choose not to go down that road, but the ultimate answer is a regime change. And so back to your first question was, just remind me.
Will the naval blockade alone be enough, or will it require something else to get over that tipping point, as you're describing, to get rid of the regime and replace them with something more pro-Western?
Well, the naval blockade, not allowing them to either import or export, is going to take many, many months for their oil facilities, for their pumping of oil to implode, for them to run out of places to put oil in tankers. And so that is where time goes on, that who is going to be more patient is going to win this battle. As far as the Straits of Hormuz and getting oil out from our allies, from the UAE, Kuwait, out to the Sea of Oman, that means we're going to have to forcefully open the straits. Now, we have done that in the past. There was something called Operation Praying Mantis during the tanker wars by the Iran-Iraq war. We really need to open that up. And if we open it up to traffic of friendly nations and close it to Iran, eventually that pressure will hit Iran. Now, remember, this regime, and I think we forget, and we start talking about them as a rational actor, they are a revolutionary Islamist regime that will do anything to survive. They killed over 40,000 of their people in cold blood. They've been doing this. They've declared war on the United States 47 years ago. This is not new. And again, I don't think the American people really know the full story here. And I really do believe if the president went on with a major address, I believe there are 20%, we'll call them the independents of the United States, that really are looking for an answer of why we're here, why this advances our interest, what is success, what are the objectives. And I think if that's laid out in a more sober way, not in a political way, I don't believe you're going to bring Democrats on board because this is a political issue for them. But I do believe most Americans want to hear the reasons why we're doing this and why this is in our interest.
It would seem that if we think about the political pressures on President Trump as the midterms come around the corner, it's really the opening of the Strait of Hormuz that asserts any pressure on him, because it seems like gas prices are the main thing that's being used against him, and rightfully so. People are paying more at the pump than they have in a long time, even though the price did come down significantly when he came into office. They're back up to where they were before. Is it possible to open up the Straits of Hormuz without needing to do sort of an Epic Fury 2.0 and allow the naval blockade on Iran to enforce pressure on them while bringing the price of oil down?
Well, I don't think anybody should minimize the effect that increased gas prices affecting people's pocketbook. But is it worth it, and can it be explained, and can the American people for the long run make this something that they can tolerate? I think we should differentiate between another Operation Epic Fury and some types of kinetic action and opening up the Straits of Hormuz. The Straits of Hormuz can be opened up. It is going to take not just weeks, but maybe months to fully open it up, to take out the mines. We really need to bring some allies on board, even if just symbolically. And we can do that without a major operation. You are going to need some kinetic action, and we could do this without any significant boots on the ground, if any boots on the ground. But what's going to have to happen is you're going to have to probably escort ships with destroyers, tankers through there. They are going to be vulnerable. The kinetic action is going to be attacking the drones and missile bases and the fast boats that are coming out. Remember, Iran has been preparing for this for a long time. And that is going to need to go on, and maybe go on indefinitely. But we really, I think, need to, and this is where the president's leadership would be very important, the Gulf nations that are just receiving Iranian fire need to join here. We need to get our friends in South Asia and in the Far East, the South Koreans, the Japanese, to come on board here. And then maybe the Europeans, supposedly the UK and France might be sending some type of military assets to the region. This is an international waterway. This is a black and white issue. I know the Middle East is five-dimensional chess, but this is binary. It must be open, and we cannot acquiesce to the Iranian demand that they control the Straits of Hormuz or give them any rights beyond what an international waterway should be. And by the way, if we don't, and if the regime remains in place, they're going to always threaten us doing this. And this type of regime, remember, they think we're on a Western timeline. The president has timeline that he's worried about the War Powers Act in Congress, and he's worried about the 250th anniversary of our nation. We don't want to be in war. And then, of course, the midterm elections. But the Iranians think in decades and centuries, and that is a disadvantage we have. But for the short term, being months and maybe even years, we really need to address this now, or Iran will keep coming back to threaten our interests.
Well, Dr. Eric Mandel, thank you so much for your analysis this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Coming up, top-level U.S.-China meetings this week with President Trump and Secretary Bessent heading to Asia, what each side aims to achieve, and the obstacles and opportunities present. Welcome back. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he'll meet with officials in Japan and South Korea before President Trump's meeting with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping.
He announced yesterday what he called a quick series of meetings. He's planning to depart today.
Bessent said on X that he will meet with Japan's Prime Minister tomorrow and stop in Seoul for talks with Chinese Vice Premier Li Feng.
Bessent says economic security is national security and that he looks forward to a productive series of engagements.
The Trump-Xi summit is scheduled for this Thursday and Friday. The two leaders are expected to discuss Taiwan, the Iran war, tariffs, and China's purchase of U.S. soybeans and Boeing aircraft. And following Secretary Bessent's meetings in Asia, President Trump meeting with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping in Beijing. Joining us now for analysis is retired Marine Colonel Grant Newsham, a former U.S. diplomat and now a senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy, also author of When China Attacks. Good to have you with us this morning, Colonel.
Oh, good morning. Glad to be here.
Now, from your perspective as a longtime China watcher and former Marine, what does success look like for the U.S. side in these meetings, and what does success look like for Xi Jinping?
Well, that's a good question. I think success for the Americans is to get the Chinese to talk to the Iranians and tell them to knock it off, to end the war, and to give the Americans what they want. That probably isn't going to happen. You also want the Chinese to buy a lot more American products. That soybeans, of course, are agricultural products, are often mentioned, Boeing aircraft as well. But that's an easy thing to get. What you really want, if you have any sort of success, is to have China go easy on Taiwan, stop threatening America, stop threatening Taiwan, go easy on them. You want China to stop sending fentanyl into the United States that's killed over 800,000 Americans. You want them to stop discriminating against American companies in China and trying to destroy them. You want China to stop stealing our intellectual property. You want China to keep the promises they made when they joined the World Trade Organization over 20 years ago. Now, are these things likely to happen? Probably not. What does China see as success? One, they would like President Trump to say something which suggests a weakening in American support for Taiwan. They would even better like him to do something, say, slow down arms sales, to Taiwan. So those are things that China would really like. They would like America to promise to relax all sanctions on technology to China, to stop talking about controlling Chinese investments into the United States. They would like us to not mention human rights. Those are things that China would like us to do. So the definitions of success are quite different. The likelihood of any of it happening are not very high, other than China and America agreeing that there will be some Chinese purchases of some American products, and they'll even keep talking. America would also like, and this is important, to have China agree to not control rare earth mineral exports to the United States, of which they've got a stranglehold, also not to use their chokehold on pharmaceuticals to America. So it's a very tentative sort of ceasefire we've got going with the Chinese. In some respects, President Trump is actually playing for time to get America off of this pathologic addiction to the China market and to Chinese manufacturing good and precursor materials.
So much to unpack here. Let's look at Iran. President Trump reportedly asking China to help pressure Iran toward a deal and to help stabilize the Strait of Hormuz. How much real leverage does China actually have over Iran, and why would Beijing help the U.S. here when it has its own strategic relationship with Tehran that it presumably wants to maintain?
Well, China has immense leverage over Iran. It has kept the Iranian regime afloat for over 30 years. It buys almost all of Iran's oil. It provides the mechanisms for Iran to get around sanctions, to get the foreign exchange that it needs, to be able to prop up the regime. It provides weapons, provides missiles, the materials, the fuel you need actually to create, to be able to launch missiles, and it provides political support, political cover. It keeps sanctions from getting put on Iran more than they would be. It helps Iran violate sanctions. So China is the thing that keeps that regime afloat. They have a lot of influence over it. Are they going to do that? I don't think they would. But China's in a bit of a bind because they do depend on a lot of energy. A good chunk of it comes from the Middle East. In addition to what they get from Iran, they actually buy even more from the GCC states, from the Gulf Arab nations as well. And while they talk a good game and they act like they're not worried, China is very worried about a sort of a tightening of access to energy, because they are still very dependent on that. But at the same time, they would like President Trump to get bogged down in Iran, not be able to extricate himself, not able to defeat the Iranian regime, because they know that causes him political problems at home. They know he has midterm elections coming up. He has a restive Congress that would like to rein him in a bit. Some people in it would, at least. And they know he's on a timeline of sorts. He may say he's not, but the Chinese think he is. And so they're trying to do two things at once. One is to get access to that energy, but they also like seeing Mr. Trump sort of swinging in the wind, and they would like him to give some concessions in order for a promise of Chinese help. Promises of Chinese help often never seem to materialize in anything useful, however. So it's hard to know what China's going to actually do, but one should be skeptical of it.
Certainly so. And to that point, Colonel, Secretary Rubio discussed raising human rights in China during this meeting, saying, quote, "We always do. It's important." You mentioned the CCP really doesn't want to discuss those kinds of things ever. But the CCP also isn't moving away from some key violations like organ harvesting or persecution against religious groups like Christians and Falun Gong. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's the nature of that regime. It's a brutal regime. Anything that they think threatens its control, they will dominate it and destroy it if necessary. That includes murder. The organ harvesting racket is a huge profit maker for Chinese Communist Party elites as well. And also they get organs that they think lets them live longer. So it's the nature of the regime. It really can't help itself in some way. But this is something that the free, civilized nations need to highlight. And whenever they do, China squirms. They really don't like it. And particularly Chinese leadership is what I'm talking about. They just hate it. And it is actually, one would have to say, something that the United States of all nations should be the ones raising this and constantly repeating it and putting the issue front and center so it can't be ignored. Because ultimately, as I said, this goes to the nature of the Chinese Communist Party regime. And that's been the nature of it since the day of its founding.
Yeah, revelations around human rights violations in China are really horrific. Do you think they've become a geopolitical liability for the CCP?
Well, if the civilized nations use it, And they actually say, well, look, if this is how you are, we're not going to do any business with you. You're not going to do business with us. I think ultimately the civilized nations, the free nations, need to form their own trading bloc and let China do business with the North Koreas, the Russians, and the Irans of the world, and maybe Cuba as well. But that's, I think, where we need to go. There is no way to actually cut a deal with the PRC. I don't see it actually changing. But the free nations have to decide whether they value a little extra money more than just allowing this sort of just grievous, human rights atrocities to take place.
Colonel Grant Newsham, great to have you with us this morning. Thank you so much.
No, thanks for having me.
Russia and Ukraine are accusing each other of violating a 3-day ceasefire brokered by the United States.
Ukraine accuses Russia of carrying out drone attacks in nearly 150 battlefield clashes during the ceasefire.
Ukraine's President Zelensky saying yesterday that Russia is not observing the truce. He said an absence of large-scale Russian attacks meant Ukraine refrained from long-range attacks in retaliation, but he added Ukraine would respond in the same manner if Russia returns to full-scale warfare.
Meanwhile, Russia alleges Ukraine carried out nearly 1,200 strikes plus 7,000 drone attacks during the truce, which is set to expire today.
The U.S. brokered ceasefire also includes prisoner exchange involving 1,000 prisoners from each side. On Saturday, Russian President Vladimir Putin said he believes the war in Ukraine is nearing an end.
President Trump announced the ceasefire on Friday, saying that he personally requested the pause in attacks. The president also saying he hopes the temporary ceasefire receives, quote, a big extension. And joining us now to discuss the war is Rebecca Grant. She's vice president at the Lexington Institute, as well as a national security analyst. Rebecca, thank you for joining us this morning. There were those reports that Putin said on Saturday that the war was coming to an end, a dramatic shift in tone. And then we see both sides blame the other for violating the ceasefire. So what are your thoughts as to what actually happened over the weekend?
Yes, of course, this coincided with the May Day parade in Moscow, which was a pitiful parade. No tanks, no long-range missiles, just formations marching, and unfortunately, a North Korean group there as well. And along with this, Putin made this kind of noticeable statement about the war maybe winding down. And I think it caught our eye because we haven't really heard him say anything quite like that before. Now, unfortunately, it also came with some other baggage. Oh, he's willing to meet Zelensky, but not until there's a peace agreement finalized. He's willing to negotiate, but he wants a former German chancellor to do the talking. So that's not very serious. But the fact is, Putin is not winning this war. His casualties have been tremendous. And right now, Russian forces are not making a lot of progress on the ground. Yeah, that ceasefire was not watertight. But really, Russia doesn't have the momentum in the Donbass that they had a year ago.
Yeah, momentum, almost as if it's like a four-quarter football match, and we're past halftime, and you feel almost like a momentum shift as you're describing. There's a report out from the Institute of War. This report was on Friday, and it stated that Ukraine may be turning the tide in terms of territory loss gain in the month of April. And they attribute that to the drone capabilities, coupled with Putin's now change in tone. Is there a reversal in terms of who's the aggressor at this point?
Well, no question, Russia, the overall aggressor, but Ukraine really is doing better on the battlefield. They have slowed Russia's advances, if you can even call them that. And remember, Putin has not taken all of the Donbass. He still does not have all of the territory of Donetsk, including key city like Kramatorsk. So that's on the ground. Ukraine is pretty much holding them, and the Russian momentum there just isn't any. The big change, though, of course, is Ukraine's strategic drone strikes against oil targets all across Russia, from the oil terminals up in the Baltic Sea all the way down to the Black Sea. They hit a shadow tanker in the Caspian Sea, and they've hit other infrastructure targets. And I think this is part of the reason Moscow's parade was really scaled down. It's just hard for Putin to pretend he's winning when at one point his oil export production capability was down about 40% in April due to these Ukrainian long-range drone strikes.
Fascinating, and of course, coupled with the Strait of Hormuz closure, that is an interesting dynamic. I almost see this parallel in some respects to Ukraine to Israel in terms of their dual-use talent when it comes to technology. Many U.S. technology companies work with Ukrainian offices and engineering teams, and that mastery tends to lend itself well to these military and AI applications. Are you seeing that combination of tech savvy as well as that economic engine that really embraces capitalism helping them compared with Russia's economic model, which is far more oligarchical and more centrally planned?
Oh, yes. And Russia's economy is in very, very tough shape, no question about it. But your real point is the incredible progress that Ukraine made first with their air defenses. Now, a lot of U.S. technology helped them there, but they've created an air defense that is 85, 90, even 95% effective against Russian drones and missiles. Now they've also created their own ability, has Ukraine, to strike, to target and strike, as I mentioned, Russian oil targets in particular. They've also hit some Russian Air Force bases over the past several months. This has been underreported, but it's been an incredibly effective source of strategic pressure and economic pressure against Russia. And it really tells you, you're right, the engine of capitalism and allies together is giving Ukraine a lot more strategic leverage than they had in the past.
And Rebecca, we frequently have the Ukrainian Freedom Project in, Stephen and Anna, and they tell us that Russian often targets houses of worship and other very symbolically civilian locations. Is that very much still happening in your view? And where do you see things playing out over the next month?
Yes, Russia is very indiscriminate in its targeting. Remember how they took out the Mariupol theater at the beginning of the war? They do go for civilian targets, which is absolutely terrible. Ukraine, in contrast, when they do strikes into Russia with drones, they are specifically targeting, remote oil pumping locations, legitimate military targets. And I think we're going to continue to see Russia do these indiscriminate strikes. Putin is using this as pressure on Ukraine. He also likes to do it to scare Europe. It's been going on a long time. More than 58,000 drones of Iranian design, as you know, have been launched by Russia against Ukraine. And it is terrible what Putin is doing.
Well, hopefully this does represent a turning point. We'll have to wait and see. Dr. Rebecca Grant, thank you so much for your analysis this morning.
Thank you.
Turning now to Morocco, where a search team has recovered the body of an American soldier who went missing during a multinational training exercise.
First Lieutenant Kendrick Lamont Key Jr. was found in the water near the Capdraw training area after going missing on May 2nd.
He was taking part in African Lion 26, a major U.S.-led exercise involving forces from more than 40 countries. Search operations involved more than 1,000 U.S. and Moroccan personnel.
The Moroccan military located Key's remains along the shoreline near where he initially went missing. The U.S. Army says it's notified his next of kin. The Army says a second soldier remains missing as search efforts continue in the same area.
And our thoughts are with Key's family and our hopes, certainly, with the other soldier who's missing. President Trump says 3 Polish and 2 Moldovan prisoners have been released from detention in Belarus and Russia.
The president saying the release was secured through U.S. efforts led by Special Envoy John Cole.
He says Polish journalist Andrzej Pozbut is among those freed. Pozbut has been in prison in Belarus since 2021. The
president saying the release followed a request from Poland's president.
President Trump thanking Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko for his cooperation.
And Poland's prime minister says the release followed a complex 2-year diplomatic effort involving multiple partners.
Meanwhile, the new Hungarian prime minister was sworn in on Saturday. Peter Magyar was elected on promises of change.
He was in the same political party as the outgoing Viktor Orban until just a couple of years ago.
Magyar defeated Orban in an election landslide last month, handing his center-right party a constitutional majority. Foreign investors have welcomed Magyar's victory with the Hungarian currency, the forint, hinting 4-year highs against the euro.
Magyar has said he would suspend public media news broadcasts after taking power. He accused state media and pro-Orban outlets of helping the former leader maintain his hold on power.
Hungary's famous dancing politician stole the show again after Magyar's inauguration. The leading candidate for health minister did an impromptu performance of his viral dance on the steps of the Hungarian parliament. A moment of levity there.
Yeah, he can certainly get down, can he?
Looks like it. Getting others involved too. All right, and coming up, a New York lawmaker is turning his focus to hidden fees in food and grocery delivery apps, looking to ban so-called surveillance pricing.
And a deadly security breach at the Denver International Airport after a person ran onto the runway and was killed by a departing passenger jet. The latest on that investigation.
Welcome back. Congress returns to Washington this week with hearings focused on China, national security, COVID oversight, defense spending, and border enforcement.
Senate Republicans are also moving forward with their funding plans for ICE and CBP. NTD's Chris Bobb reports from Capitol Hill.
The only way you can guarantee a matching organ on a specific date is if you control when the donor dies.
The Congressional Executive Commission on China holds a hearing on forced organ harvesting in China. The panel includes senior research fellow Ethan Gutman, former ambassador at large for international religious freedom Sam Brownback, survivor Kal Ben-Or Sadiq, and Epoch Times senior editor Jan Jekielek. Jekielek recently published a book on the topic.
Bill to order China's organ harvesting industry and the true nature of America's biggest adversary, China. That control exists in a prison system full of political and religious prisoners, especially Falun Gong practitioners and Uyghurs.
There is bipartisan legislation in Congress now to combat this.
The Falun Gong and Victims of Forced Organ Harvesting Protection Act.
Yeah.
And it just does something very simple. It sanctions people that are involved in this.
Also next week, FBI Director Kash Patel appears before senators to discuss the Bureau's 2027 budget request. His testimony comes as the FBI continues investigating the attempted assassination of President Trump at the Washington Hilton during the White House Correspondents' Dinner. We can expect lawmakers to push for more details. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth and Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dan Kane returned to Capitol Hill for another hearing on the Pentagon's $1.5 trillion budget request.
This president's budget for 2027 supports the Secretary and the Department's goal of reinvigorating, recharging the defense industrial base and the national industrial base, enhancing our readiness and securing our military advantage.
A ceasefire is in place in Iran.
The topic of Iran, I'm sure, will come up often today, which I welcome. I look forward to sharing the incredible success of our military effort achieved in a matter of weeks.
The Senate Homeland Security Committee plans a hearing featuring whistleblower testimony on COVID. Chairman Rand Paul posting on X, quote, "The American people still don't know the full story behind the COVID cover-up." Meanwhile, Congress is advancing the next phase of a reconciliation package after they funded other DHS agencies outside of ICE and CBP before recess. Lawmakers considering a reconciliation package totaling roughly $72 billion through 2029, including more than $30 billion for ICE and over $3 billion for CBP. Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley says the legislation would help provide, quote, certainty for federal law enforcement and safer streets for American families. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Chris Bobb, NTD News.
Thank you, Chris. And Frontier Airlines plane had to abort takeoff after striking and killing a person on the runway. Officials say the person jumped a fence and ran onto the airfield moments before the collision.
The impact then sparked an engine fire and it filled the airplane cabin with smoke. Passengers were forced to evacuate using the emergency slides. Here's more on that.
A deadly security breach at Denver International Airport. A Frontier Airlines flight to Los Angeles was taking off just after 11 Friday night when the crew reported hitting a person on the runway. Airport officials say the unidentified person jumped the perimeter fence only minutes earlier. The person is not believed to be an airport employee. Passengers on board described the chaotic scene inside the cabin after the impact.
I would say it was a loud explosion sound. And it was shocking and jarring, and people were definitely startled and screamed. Me and my row mates are all just saw fire, and the smoke is coming in on our row.
Frontier Airlines said smoke was reported inside the cabin, prompting pilots to abort takeoff. Passengers then evacuated the plane using emergency slides onto the tarmac. The airline says there were 224 passengers and 7 crew members on board. 12 members suffered minor injuries during the evacuation, and 5 people were taken to hospitals. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said the person deliberately breached airport security and ran onto the runway. The runway reopened Saturday morning around 11 a.m. The National Transportation Safety Board is now investigating.
Meanwhile, in New York, a lawmaker is turning his focus to hidden fees in food and grocery delivery apps, looking to ban surveillance pricing. NTD's Sean Marshall has the details.
U.S. Representative Dan Goldman of New York believes consumers should know all about the hidden costs up front before checkout when using food and grocery delivery apps. He's introduced the Promoting Real-Time Information on Cost Expenditure Bill, or PRICE Act legislation.
I think the PRICE Act does a few good things, which is that it requires that I don't need to go to the final step to see what the full price is, right? And this is something similar in other industries. Concert tickets is one that comes to mind, right? There's been a lot of outcry about why is my concert ticket like double the price by the time I get to the point where I have to put my credit card in. I think where this PRICE Act really falls short is that it doesn't cap the fees. So if delivery apps are still able to charge you double the price or triple the price and still able to add on like 5 or 6 fees in the line item pricing, then that doesn't really help consumers or Americans who are looking to use these apps. So I think really there should be a cap on the number of fees or on the percentage of fees that these platforms are allowed to charge you.
Representative Goldman wants to ban these apps from engaging in exploitative surveillance pricing. His bill says these practices harm consumers by making it virtually impossible to comparison shop and by hindering competitive markets.
Surveillance pricing is something that Americans should definitely be concerned about for a variety of reasons. It ultimately really gives the platforms a lot of power because, like you mentioned, they have access to where you are, what you buy. They can put you into a demographic box if they think that you can pay more, not just because you have more purchasing power, but because you may be in a situation where you're categorized as a desperate user.
Hidden fees don't only affect the consumers, they can also have effects on the food businesses in the apps.
So there can be a distrust between that where users feel like restaurants are upcharging the food pricing, and sometimes the pricing upcharge is, double the price. It can be 30% higher, 50% higher. Sometimes it's a pretty substantial increase. Ultimately, the restaurants are the ones who are often still losing out. Restaurants are still barely meeting their margin requirements, and restaurants are already operating on quite thin margins in the United States.
The PRICE Act requires delivery apps to show consumers the total running all-in price of their order as items are added to their carts. It also requires that the apps include, prior to checkout, a clear breakdown that prominently displays the ongoing total purchase amount, along with an explanation of each fee. The bill additionally bans food delivery apps from engaging in surveillance pricing, an exploitative pricing strategy where companies use personal data, including location, browsing history, device type, and shopping habits, to set individualized prices. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Yeah, it's a great report from Sean. I think that, with any type of new and existing service, there's an opportunity for bad actors. So anything that promotes transparency and fairness and not offering one price to one person and another price to another based on, did they, through behavioral targeting practices. But at the same time, there is a free market and you can choose to use an app or not use an app. So I think we have to watch that we don't go to the other extreme with these types of things.
Certainly.
One man's opinion,
Well, at least, with the continual development of services and technology, there's always going to be iterations of whatever agreements are framed around them. So this is another example of that. We'll be keeping you updated of any major developments there. Meanwhile, coming up May 13th is World Falun Dafa Day. Falun Dafa practitioners gathering Saturday in New York City, showing resilience amid persecution to mark the upcoming 34th anniversary with meditation, music, and cultural performances.
And up in Canada, mayors are raising the Falun Dafa Day flag, and they're sending a message to Beijing.
Welcome back. The Trump administration celebrating Mother's Day yesterday and thanking moms across the country for their love and dedication.
Here's Acting Secretary of the Navy, Hung Kao, with a message for all mothers, thanking them for, quote, what you do every day and for loving your children.
Happy Mother's Day. On this day, we celebrate all the mothers out there for all the hard work you've done. I know your burden's hard, and you're always caring for your children no matter where they are, whether they're deployed or at home asking when dad's coming home. I want to recognize the two most important mothers I know. First, my mom. In 1975, as we're fleeing Vietnam, my mom had to sew notes into our clothes saying, "This is my son, please take care of him." That's the reality of war, and this is the sacrifice of a mom. And then my own wife, who had to give birth to our oldest child as I was deploying for Iraq, not knowing if I'd ever come home. And over the years, had to care for our 5 children during multiple combat deployments. I'm always amazed at the love of a mother and what they're willing to do for their children. So thank you to all the mothers out there for what you do every day and for loving your children. Happy Mother's Day.
The administration also launched a new website, moms.gov, an effort to provide resources for expecting women and their families.
In a post on X, the Department of Health and Human Services said it's working to, quote, support moms, their children, and families with clear science-based information and resources at every stage. Well, that was a very inspiring message from the new leader of the Navy, Hung Kao. I mean, wow, his own mom escaped a war-torn communist country, sewing notes into their clothing, in case of separation or what have you.
Incredible.
And then having 5 kids while being deployed. Certainly a very inspirational figure.
It sure is. And adding to this, the presidential message from the White House, from President Trump on Mother's Day, goes quite long, but just a part of it is, so much of who we become begins with a mother's example. The confidence we carry and the lessons we live by are often first modeled by women who devote themselves wholly to seeing that our American dreams come to life and that our potential remains unlimited. And I just found that to be so true for my own mom and for so many of the moms that I know. So shout out to all the moms.
Hear, hear.
Yeah.
Hear, hear.
And coming up this week on May 13th is World Falun Dafa Day.
That's right. In the run-up to that event, practitioners gathering over the weekend in New York City for a celebration featuring meditation, music, and cultural performances. And NTD's Niku Bani brings us more on that.
Falun Dafa, also known as Falun Gong, is a spiritual practice rooted in meditation exercises and the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Practitioners gather this weekend for a celebration ahead of May 13th, the anniversary marking 34 years since Falun Dafa's public introduction in China in 1992.
Falun Dafa, it guides me how to be a good person, to be a better person.
Ever since I started practicing Dafa, I felt a sense of calmness, and this calmness is not something which is external, it comes from within.
Some passerby also joined in the meditation, describing the experience afterwards.
It was really nice. I heard all the city sirens and everything, but it was I was able to block it out, and my mind felt really clear and powerful.
An overwhelming sense of compassion. And I don't know if acceptance, but it was this feeling of love and kindness. It was still gives me tears.
The event also features traditional dances and musical performances, bringing together practitioners of all ages to celebrate the practice and its upcoming anniversary. But for many practitioners, this celebration is also a reminder of and a chance to speak out for those who cannot practice freely in China. The Chinese Communist Party has persecuted Falun Dafa since July 20th, 1999.
Practitioners in China are persecuted and put in labor camps, tortured, and even organ harvested. It's important for people to know, because it's only when everyone is really clear about what's happening in China that there's a chance for it to stop.
And with May 13th just days away, practitioners say they are preparing larger celebrations in New York City and across the world to celebrate World Falun Dafa Day. Niku Bani, NTD News, New York.
Thanks to Niku for that report. And next, moving to celebrations in Canada. Ahead of the May 13th celebrations just this Wednesday for World Falun Dafa Day, more Canadian cities have raised the Falun Dafa Day flag.
And one Canadian mayor is calling on China to stop torturing practitioners. Here's more on that.
Falun Dafa volunteers across Canada have contributed to community well-being by offering free meditation instruction, supporting mental, physical, and moral wellness, and fostering harmony within society.
Cornwall has marked Falun Dafa Day for 13 consecutive years. Days later, Nanaimo, British Columbia did the same.
I, Leonard Krogh, Mayor of the City of Nanaimo, do hereby proclaim May 13th, 2026 as Falun Dafa Day in the City of Nanaimo in the province of British Columbia.
At the Cornwall ceremony, a councillor from a nearby township said the principles spoke to a wider need.
The core beliefs, the truthfulness and compassion and forbearance, I think is extremely timely in today's world, is something that can be shared by all, no matter where you are in the world.
These gestures of support reach far beyond our community, enriching the public by raising awareness of Falun Dafa and highlighting the vital importance of human rights and freedom of belief.
Falun Dafa, also known as Falun Gong, was first introduced to the public in China in 1992. Today, it is practiced by more than 100 million people in over 100 countries. The Chinese Communist Party has persecuted Falun Dafa since 1999.
We should be doubly grateful to be here in Canada, which was the first to recognize and honor Falun Dafa of the international community. I'm very proud of that. There we go. The right to practice Falun Dafa is important, and civic leaders need to show their support. The right to be who you want to be, to practice whatever faith you wish in this country is a fundamental Canadian value.
I call upon the Chinese government to cease doing that, to cease persecuting and torturing individuals. The rest of the world is watching. The rest of the world supports you.
NTD News, Canada.
And this Wednesday, a grand parade also taking place right here in New York City. Carrie and I will be covering that, and we hope you join us right here on NTD.
That's right. Don't miss our special coverage of the annual World Falun Dafa Day Parade. It's going to be on Wednesday, as Steph said, May 13th. It starts at 10:30. Steph, myself, and some special guests, which we will not announce at the moment.
That's right.
Honestly, it really is an honor to be able to host this grand parade. There are, as we saw in the packages, there are Falun Dafa Day celebrations happening all over the world, but the biggest and the grandest is going to be in the biggest city in the world, right here in New York City, and I can't wait to be able to host that with you. It should be great.
Sure, for me too, Carrie. And you know, the thing is that this represents, there are Falun Dafa practitioners all around the world, and they're all wanting to come out and show their gratitude for the practice. So it's going to be a really beautiful day.
Yeah, I'm very excited as well. Let's put it there.
All right.
Yeah. Well, we do have to wrap up the show here, but if you have a story you'd like to see us cover, we won't know unless you send us an email at goodmorning@ntd.com. We'd love your feedback.
And for round-the-clock original news coverage, you can always watch us live at ntd.com/TV or download our NTD app. I'm Stephanie Cox.
And I'm Carrie Duns. Thanks for watching.